hold on a second, Scott. I am not minimizing. Just because I'm putting facts on the table doesn't mean that I'm minimizing the deaths of anyone.
She's both sizing it.
I am. No, it's not called both sizing it. It's called information. Okay. Information is okay to consume. Like, it's fine to say that it is both bad that Christians are being killed and also it is bad that Muslims are being killed. Are you able to say that?
In today's video, Abby Phillip destroys Scott Jennings on CNN's Newsnight, with Abby Phillip in a heated debate over Donald Trump's reaction to the violence unfolding in Nigeria. Abby Phillip confronts Scott Jennings head-on, calling out the dangerous oversimplification behind Trump's narrative and exposing how framing the crisis as a one-sided genocide ignores the broader reality that both Christians and Muslims are being targeted in massive numbers. As Scott Jennings scrambles to defend Trump's selective outrage, Abby Phillip pushes back with facts, context, and the hypocrisy behind Trump's uneven humanitarian priorities. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip shuts down Scott Jennings on CNN's Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
This is kind of typical Trump fashion. He reacts to what he's seeing on television. But in this case, promising American military action in Nigeria over this issue where his facts are not even really lined up with what is happening on the ground, it's perplexing.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things to point out. One is that the president has, part of his charm to a large number of the American public is the fact that he reacts on the go. But this is also part of the problem, right? Why are we finding out about potential foreign policy from a Truth Social tweet or Truth Social, whatever it's called? Why are we finding out in this way? Why is the president making decisions in this way? Why aren't we having larger conversations behind the scenes about very serious accusations in foreign policy? The second thing is the reality is that on the ground, violence and really explosive violence in Nigeria isn't limited to Christians. It's something that is actually kind of cross-cultural, cross-religious. If you look at the bare numbers on the ground, you find that Muslim Nigerians are also experiencing the same level of violence, if not higher.
To that point, this is from the Associated Press. There have been a number of attacks, 20,000 deaths out of 11,000 attacks. But of those, 385 attacks were targeted against Christians, resulting in 317 deaths. But in the same period, there were 417 deaths among Muslims in 196 attacks.
I don't think you can minimize this, Abby.
No.
There's been about 100,000, upwards of 100,000 since 2009.
Hold on a second.
7,000 this year.
Hold on a second, Scott. Hold on a second, Scott. I am not minimizing. Just because I'm putting facts on the table doesn't mean that I'm minimizing the deaths of anyone.
She's both sizing it.
I am. No, it's not called both sizing it. It's called information. Okay. Information is okay to consume. Like, it's fine to say that it is both bad that Christians are being killed and also it is bad that Muslims are being killed. Are you able to say that?
Here's what I'm able to say. Upwards of 100,000 Christians in Nigeria have been slaughtered. It is a genocide. The same people who are worried about the Middle East have nothing to say about this.
Scott,
there's
just 1 second.
7,000 deaths this year,
hold on
35 per day.
Scott,
it's
hold on a second.
I care about both, and it is wrong that either of those things is happening in the first place. Empathy is not a zero-sum game. We can care about both. And the answer to the question that you were just asked,
So are you against the president intervening?
The question that you were just asked had a simple yes or no answer. And you decided to drag it on.
I don't want anyone to die, but I'm telling you right now, Christians are being systematically slaughtered, and they have been for years, and nobody cares until Donald Trump.
People actually in Nigeria are pointing out that, yes, Christians are being killed, but so are Muslims. Muslims are also being killed. Let me give you another anecdote, and I'll let you get in, Penny, because I know you want to talk. But a Nigerian human rights advocate specializing in security and development disputed Trump's claims, telling CNN that they reflect a dangerous oversimplification of Nigeria's complex security crisis. Yes, these extremist groups have sadly killed many Christians. However, they have massacred tens of thousands of Muslims. He noted that the group's attacks on other civilian locations, such as markets, bus stops, and refugee camps, disproportionately harm Muslims. No one is minimizing the deaths of any person, including Christians.
What really sticks out in this exchange is that Abby Phillip and David Hogg are trying to keep the conversation grounded in what experts on Nigeria have actually been saying for years. And the facts are pretty clear. The violence in Nigeria isn't a one-direction Christian genocide. It's a widespread security crisis affecting Christians and Muslims. Nigerian human rights groups ACL-Ed Data and Amnesty International have all reported that extremist groups like Boko Haram and ISWAP have killed tens of thousands of Muslims, often because they're attacking majority Muslim regions. That's not minimizing anyone's suffering. It's just the full picture. And that's the part Scott Jennings ignores. Oversimplifying Nigeria's conflict actually makes things worse because groups on the ground use that kind of rhetoric to fuel more sectarian tension. Nigerian analysts have warned about this repeatedly. Plus, it's worth noting, if Trump were genuinely focused on protecting persecuted Christians, his administration wouldn't have slashed refugee admissions to historic lows. In 2020, the US took in fewer than 2,000 African refugees total, so the outrage suddenly appearing now doesn't exactly line up with the policy record. Abby and David are simply insisting on a fact-based, consistent approach, and that's the only way to talk about a crisis this complex.
But when Trump is saying that he's gonna bomb a country over the genocide of one particular group while ignoring the disproportionate killing of another group in that same country, it just doesn't logically make a lot of sense.
I think the way he knows about this is through the U.S. Commission on Religious Freedom, who have openly has been discussing this because, surprisingly, and I was surprised to learn this, that the number one group of people that are killed for their religion are Christians around the world.
Okay, well, we're talking about Nigeria.
Well, and in Nigeria, 82, and for 22 to 23, 82% of those murdered, and it was a large number, and it wasn't just Christians, 82% were Christians. It is the Christian churches that are crying out, and we've been ignoring them. And so I'm grateful that we're having this conversation. And yes, of course, we need to save lives. I'm pro-life. I want to save every life. And so we can be in favor of saving the innocent from Islamist fascists who are murdering them. And it's not just happening in Nigeria. It's happening in Niger. It's happening in other countries in Africa. And it's got to be dealt with. And I am so deeply appreciative that President Trump is taking this on very publicly, because we have got to take this seriously and finally start talking about it.
Well, look, I think everyone is right. I mean, I hate to say it, but Christians are being persecuted. They are being killed. That is true. But it is also true that Muslims have been killed in the country, right? And so, yeah, like Boko Haram is, a big problem there. First of all, you have a genocide that's been going on in Sudan. You have almost 1 million people between the Ukrainians and the Russians that have been killed. You have what's going on in China and the Uyghurs. By the way, there is a lot of bad stuff going.
By the way,
correct. That's right.
Being killed and persecuted by the communists. Who's the biggest threat to Muslims? Communists.
But your premise of the question, Abby, it's a little strange. Like John Bolton got arrested, but somehow Trump has adopted his foreign policy. So there is a fight in the Republicans between the isolationists, which is a growing wing of the Republican Party, and Trump's foreign policy, and they are different. Trump has decided to intervene in some of these areas. By the way, I'm not necessarily against that. The United States has to have a role in the world, because if we don't, China will fill that void. Every time we withdraw, which is why Democrats were fighting Republicans when we started withdrawing foreign aid around the world, every time we withdraw, whether it's dollars or presents, China is coming in.
What Rep. Jared Moskowitz is getting at, and what really matters here, is that Nigeria's violence is far more complex than the one-sided story being pushed. Independent data from groups like ACLED and the UN shows that extremist groups such as Boko Haram and ISWAP have targeted everyone in their path. In several of the deadliest attacks over the last decade, Muslim communities were actually the majority of victims, especially in Borno and Yobe states. That doesn't downplay Christian suffering. It highlights that both groups are being devastated and that any US response has to recognize the full picture. Another important point, if Trump wants to position himself as the global defender of persecuted Christians, his record doesn't line up. His administration cut refugee admissions to historic lows, including for African Christians fleeing the very violence he now claims to be outraged about. Yet at the same time, he pushed to fast-track refugee status for white South Africans based on a debunked genocide claim. That kind of inconsistency is exactly what Moskowitz is pointing out, and strategically, Moskowitz is right. If the US disengages, China steps in. That's already happening across West Africa through infrastructure deals and military partnerships. Moskowitz isn't minimizing anyone's suffering. He's saying we need facts, consistency, and smart policy, not impulsive threats based on incomplete narratives.
And filling that void.
One question that I have, considering that Trump is very concerned about persecution, is he going to extend refugee status to Christian Nigerians the way he extended them to white South Africans based on a very much disputed and arguably false claim of genocide in South Africa?
That's a great question. I think we're going to unfortunately find the answer to be a massive double standard, unless I stand to be corrected.
I don't agree with that at all. I think
so. He's going to extend
perhaps, I don't know. I haven't had this conversation with him at all, or anyone.
South Africans,
perhaps.
Scott,
perhaps also.
Or is it just white people who get special status in Trump's? Literally, the bar in Trump's new humanitarian policy is being a white South African. That is the preference that he is giving to certain people.
The bar is not being a criminal.
No. What about the black Christian Nigerians? Are they going to get special status?
I don't know.
If they're being persecuted?
I don't know, but here's what I do know. Right now, the topic of the day is whether we are going to intervene so that these people wouldn't need refugee status.
But hold on. So we are going to bomb Nigeria, but you won't say that Trump
radical Islamic terrorists.
You won't say whether Trump should offer them the ability to leave Nigeria if they are being
Well, I think the first answer would be, let's keep them from getting murdered in their own
So why
homeland.
is that not the answer for South Africans, who, by the way, are not the victims of genocide, white South Africans?
Oh, well, they are certainly the victims of mass violence.
They're not the victims of genocide. Would you not agree with that, Scott?
Well, I mean, I can argue over semantics, but there's absolutely been violence committed against these people.
It's not semantics. It's now policy. It's government policy. The Trump administration is saying they're the victims of genocide, so because they are white, they get special privilege.
I disagree with your characterization. I think in the case of
so
Nigeria,
what's the policy then?
The policy right now
but Scott,
is the country of Nigeria needs to keep
But if you disagree with me, then why? I mean, am I wrong that was not the policy that the Trump administration announced publicly?
Yes, but you're ascribing only racial motivations to it, and you're minimizing the violence that community has faced.
Because what's the definition of the people that they're going to allow in from South Africa? By definition, they have to be white in order to qualify.
Well, by definition, they are facing violence, murder, and all sorts of mayhem.
Well, look, I mean, Scott, listen, if you think I'm wrong, I would like you to present other evidence. But
well, you're saying it's only racial. I'm saying it's because they're facing violence in their own home country. And murder.
He's not saying that any
But you're also saying they're facing
He's not saying that any
Nigeria.
South Africans can come to the United States. He's saying only the white ones. I didn't say that. The State Department
That
did.
specific population is the ones who are facing the violence.
Yeah,
in Nigeria, you have radical Islamic terrorists who probably do need to be bombed a little bit.
Hey,
I agree with Jared.
It's a race-based policy in South Africa. I'm curious if Trump will extend that same grace and preference to Nigerians who he claims are also facing persecution. We will see.
What Abby Phillip is pointing out, and what really shifts this whole debate, is that US refugee and humanitarian policy shouldn't swing wildly based on race or political convenience. And when you look at the actual record, there's a clear pattern worth calling out. Under Trump, refugee admissions for African nations were slashed dramatically. In fact, according to the Migration Policy Institute, refugee admissions from Africa dropped by more than 70% during Trump's first 2 years, even as violence in places like Nigeria, Cameroon, and the Sahel was escalating. Yet at the same time, the administration fast-tracked refugee consideration specifically for white South Africans, citing a genocide claim that South Africa's own government, human rights groups, and international monitors all said was not happening. That's not semantics, that's the State Department elevating a debunked narrative while turning away Black Africans fleeing documented extremist violence. Abby is right to question why one group gets special access while another, facing far worse levels of violence, doesn't even get acknowledgement. And when it comes to Nigeria, the reality is far more complex than Scott Jennings wants to admit. The UN, Amnesty International, and the International Crisis Group all report that extremist attacks don't target a single group. They hit Christian, Muslim, and ethnic minority communities across multiple states. If Trump is suddenly positioning himself as a defender against persecution, then consistency matters. You can't call for bombing a country while refusing to say whether you'd even allow its most vulnerable people to seek safety. Abby isn't making this about partisanship. She's making it about fairness, facts, and whether US policy applies equally to everyone, not just the groups that fit a preferred narrative. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing, and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.